Thanks for joining us here on KRQE.com. I'm Chris McKee here in the News 13 Digital Studio, where you're getting an inside look at APD right now. We are expecting a press briefing here shortly about a SWAT situation that started unfolding just last night. This was out near in southeast Albuquerque, out near the area of Southern and Utah. Looks like they're doing some mic checks right now. And
Gilbert Gallegos, the Albuquerque Police Department.
We're going to
address some of the issues related to the SWAT incident last night and the fire that resulted from that. Chief Medina will start it off by going over some of that information. But I do want to stress that this is the very early start of the investigation, so we don't have a lot of facts. We want to caution everyone to wait till we have those facts to draw any conclusions. But we want to tell you and be transparent about what we do know at this point. One thing to consider, like a lot of our officer-involved shootings, we haven't interviewed anyone who directly saw what happened, what ignited the fire, that sort of thing. So that we're still trying to do that. But Chief will get into that, and I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, everybody, for being here this afternoon. We're going to talk a little bit about the SWAT incident last night, in which a possible 14-year-old lost their life due to possibly a fire. Yesterday, units from our investigative services unit was out looking for an individual that we had been tracked down reference. The individual had some felony warrants, one from the state level, one from the federal level. This individual was a person of interest in some other violent crimes throughout the city. They did locate the individual. The individual then proceeded to the location on San Joaquin, southeast, and at this time at about 6:52, investigative units asked for marked units because they attempted to take the suspect into custody, and the suspect fled into a home. At this time, they staged rescue, and at about 8:30, tactical resources started to arrive, and at 9:05, the warrant was approved by the DA's office. At about 9:19, the warrant was signed by a judge, and at 9:37, we began the SWAT activation. During the course of this SWAT activation, different types of munitions were used to encourage the individual to exit the home. It was unknown exactly where in the home the individual was, and we'll have Sergeant Jones talk a little bit about the munitions used. At about 1 o'clock, we do know that one munition was put into the home, into a room, and we're working to determine if about 2.5 hours later smoke was seen, if this munition caused that fire. We still need to determine that, and it's unknown. We've asked for the fire department arson unit to assist us in that investigation, and we're trying to determine how the origin of that fire, how it started, and what exactly was the cause. During this time, a short time later, the individual who was wanted on the warrants did exit the home, and officers were able to take them into custody, and later, as they were clearing the home, they did discover an individual in the home who was deceased. We don't know exactly who the individual was who was deceased. We've had a lot of different information come forward to us. At the beginning stages of this investigation, we were advised that it was actually a brother of the individual, Keontae Kelly, who's the individual who was taken into custody. It was said that this was his younger brother. That turns out to not be exactly truthful, and we've gotten little cooperation. We just know that this was a young individual that hung out with Mr. Kelly. Some of the information that we're getting back and some of the inaccurate information going out is we have no indication that any shots were fired by the Albuquerque Police Department. One of the key pieces coming out also of misinformation is the fact that it took time for us to turn off the fire. We got to remember that the fire department, they're not police officers. They're not equipped with the same protective gear as police officers. And it is a challenge for us to get them into an unresolved situation with an individual we believe is armed and dangerous in order for them to extinguish a fire. Next steps in this investigation obviously are we got to get a cause of death. We do not know what the cause of death is. Just to remind everybody, OMI is independent of the Albuquerque Police Department, and tomorrow we're hoping that they could give us some direction in the cause of death. We have asked, like I stated earlier, Albuquerque Fire Rescue to assist us with their fire marshal's office in this investigation to determine the origin of the fire. This is a multi-agency task force response in which the Albuquerque Police Department, the New Mexico State Police, and the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department have detectives working to try to solve and to get to the root of what occurred. The DA's office also has their representatives there to oversee and ensure that our investigation is going in the proper direction. And like I stated earlier, OMI will ultimately give us the cause of death. And once we have that cause of death and an ID on the suspect, on the subject who was found deceased, we're hoping that we could provide more of an update. Our biggest goal here is, we're asking for the community for patience. We understand that this is a young individual. We understand that there's different narratives going around, and we're encouraging anybody who has any specific video of the incident or anything that they feel is of evidentiary value to turn over a copy to the Albuquerque Police Department. They can always retain their own copy. And if the media has any video footage that we should take into consideration, please go ahead and turn that over to us. We will continue to work on this case. It is a priority of ours to be able to get this information. But one of the things that did happen this morning is we realized that a family was displaced. None of these individuals, from what we're learning now, actually were full-time residents at the location. We're still trying to determine their connection to the location. And seeing that these individuals were displaced and that we needed to do something to help them, we did ask our community safety department to come out to assist these individuals in their situation. And I'm going to turn it over to Erica Gutierrez in a second, but we're going to first go to Sergeant Mike Jones from our tactical section, who's going to kind of explain the munitions that were used yesterday and what each of their functions is in an effort to be as transparent as possible to what equipment we used at the scene yesterday. Mike?
Good afternoon. I'm Sergeant Michael Jones, the Albuquerque Police Department. I'm assigned to the tactical deployed. One of the munitions that was deployed was this flameless tri-chamber gas. It does make the environment uncomfortable, so our goal is for it to be peaceful. We also deployed ferret rounds. One is a OC vapor powder and then a CS powder that is deployed into the window, part of the window of the residence, which goes into the ceiling, and it also goes into a smaller area, but it does, again, the goal is to make it uncomfortable for the subject and or propel the subject to come out and make contact with officers peacefully.
You want to talk real quick about that, how they're placed in there?
So this one is hand deployed. Officers move up behind a team and they deploy it into a window or an opening of the structure. These are deployed through a 40 millimeter launcher. Like I said, it's deployed to the upper third of the window into the residence.
If any of those are known to be flammable?
We're going to cover that right now. In 2011 and 12, I was in charge of our tactical section as the commander, and many times the companies that sell these products would send us video to show that the tri-chamber, for example, as it's referred to, does not cause fires as advertised. It's very low likelihood. They actually dump it in a trash can full of paper to show that it doesn't ignite a fire. But there are stories around the country where they could possibly have started a fire. We've never seen that in the city of Albuquerque, and we've never deployed a tri-chamber that we know of that started a fire. The other two products are powder based, and we've never heard any stories of them, or have we seen them to start a fire in the past. Mike, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, sir. That covers it.
And so that's kind of the history of those products. They've been used by the Albuquerque Police Department for decades. As stated earlier, in 2011, when I was over the tactical section, these are some of the products that we used.
But it's possible.
It is possible. We've heard the story that it's possible that these could start fires, but we've never experienced that here. And that's what I guess the investigation is going to have to show us. Can we hold on questions? I'm going to just turn it over to ACS real quick. Erica's just going to kind of give an update of what the city has done to help the family that was displaced, and we'll take questions.
Hello, I'm Erica Gutierrez with Albuquerque Community Safety. ACS was called out this morning by APD to assist the family that went through this very traumatic and sad experience. ACS was able to help the family to find immediate shelter for the next 90 days. We also worked with helping them get other resources like food and diapers and connect them to other services. We want to thank our partners who all supported in helping us and the family, including the Red Cross, Faith Lutheran Charities, and Street Connect. Additionally, we're working to get responders out to the neighborhood to help with the secondhand trauma and to address any questions or concerns that we could give information to. Today was a really sad day for this family that lost their home, and I'm grateful that ACS was there to help the family so that police could focus on the investigation and doing their job. That's all I got. Chief?
You know, like I stated, it's still very early in the investigation. We're being as transparent as possible and putting out as much information as we're able to at the time. Our next step, like I stated, is we're going to be waiting for us to get some results back from OMI on the cause of death and hopefully help identify the individual that lost their lives. But at this point, does anybody have any questions?
Can those, the CS gas and like the OC, can they be deadly? Just like on their own without like, causing a fire or anything?
They're classified as less lethal, and I don't know of any cases where they've ever become deadly.
Were there any guns found in the home or on Mr. Kelly?
I'm glad you brought that up because I almost forgot. The motorcycle, they were working on a motorcycle in the front yard. The deceased individual and Mr. Kelly, the motorcycle has been verified as stolen, and the firearm was seen in plain sight in the vehicle that they drove up in. But we're currently in the process of obtaining search warrants to be able to recover the firearm and to be able to conduct a search on a lot of the vehicles that were on the scene.
So they drove up in a car and then they were working on a motorcycle in front of the house also?
Yes, and that's when they tried to contact them, and that's when the individual fled into the house and the barricade began.
At the beginning you said it might have resulted in the death of a 14-year-old. What makes you think the boy is 14 if you haven't identified?
We're getting a lot of mixed information from community members. We're going off erring on the side of what we're being told. We also have information that's been brought to our attention that the individual may be in their 30s. But we're going to stick with the information that this individual may be 14 years old to err on the side of caution. And this is coming from community members or neighbors who live there who said that this individual was very young and they had observed him in the past. It's just we don't have any information. We haven't been able to verify anything this early in the investigation.
Chief, can you spell the suspect's name?
Oh, God, you can't ask me to do that. We're going to ask Lieutenant Del Greco to provide that before we leave.
Okay, thank you.
I can do it to you real quick.
Yes.
Q-I-A-U-N-T.
Q-U-I...
The Q-I-A-U-N-T. And then K-E-L-L-E-Y.
Was any other type of ammunition used during the standoff? Because some of the neighbors I talked to said they might have seen some officers shoot. Could they have possibly mistaken them to shooting those canisters? Or?
You know, I'll let Sergeant Jones talk a little bit about the 40 millimeters and the device that's used. And it is possibility that those 40 millimeters, which is consistent with our less lethal options that we give to our field officers are, and he could explain a little bit about how they're deployed. And it is a possibility that people could be mistaken a less lethal 40 millimeter weapon with an actual regular gun.
Yes, like the chief said, we just used the 40 millimeter launchers to deploy those ferret rounds into the residence, and that's the only type of stuff that was shot inside the residence.
Can you explain what they look like?
So they're just the 40 millimeter launchers. They're probably about this long, and they're like the chief said, they're a less lethal tool, and so they are used for using sponge rounds to shoot inside a residence as well. But that's the only thing that we used.
And no officers fired weapons, as far as we know.
No officer, we have received no officers have fired weapons, and there's no evidence indicating any officers fired weapons. I think it's important to note that a 40 millimeter launcher does have a butt stock such that would look like a rifle. It does have a grip that would look like a rifle, and it does have a sighting system that is consistent to those that we use on some of our patrol rifles.
Yes, sir.
Chief, can you comment on kind of the community response that we've seen today? We had protesters outside, the ACLU has responded. Why does this seem like it's such a different response than any other standoff we've had?
You know, early in this incident, we had individuals who were questioning the actions of the officers. We quickly got information spreading that we knew were not accurate. We put out a statement earlier today as soon as we heard about the information going out, and quite honestly, it's disappointing. I would hope that the ACLU, who works with us under our settlement agreement, and others that clearly ask that we're always cautious and that we basically wait for us to have the probable cause to say that somebody's been arrested, and that we're careful in the accusations made towards people, would give the benefit of an investigation to occur to show if somebody truly did something right or wrong. So I hope that entities as large as the ACLU are cautious, and they're very careful of what we create in the community, and recognize that incidents like this and misinformation can lead to long-term effects within the community. We've gone through the protests in the past. We've seen the aftermath of some of these protests. So we're asking the community to have these patience, and we're asking for large entities to be responsible, do the right thing, and wait till the investigations are conducted. We are under a settlement agreement with the Department of Justice, and we have a lot of oversight within APD. So we're looking to make determinations on what occurred, and we hope that that's given to us. I also recognize that there are groups of individuals that no matter what happens are always going to have the belief that there's some kind of conspiracy, or that there's something that is being hidden from them by the police department. For those individuals, I hope that they could open their eyes, and they could look, and they could wait till facts actually come in before a determination is made that impacts the quality of our city.
I want to talk about outreach to the community and up until this point and today.
You know, this morning, matter of fact, it was probably about 5 o'clock early this morning that I reached out to some of our community activists and asked them if they were awake and they could help us with some of the messaging, because we could already see what was going on scene with some of the individuals that were on scene. And, you know, I compliment responsible media that was out there and how this has been handled, but the media itself came under criticism by some of these individuals who call themselves media, who are out there agitating and increasing how volatile the situation was. And like I said, the media itself, your counterparts are out there this morning. We had to actually send 2 officers down there to make sure that they were doing okay and that this wasn't escalating any further.
What crimes did he warrants for, and is he from Las Cruces?
There is a Las Cruces connection, and I don't have the information on the exact crimes that were that he had warrants for, but I do know that there are violent crimes that this individual is a person of interest within the city of Albuquerque, and those are still active investigations, so we're not going to release specifics on those. This individual is still alive, and we're still hoping to make those cases against him.
Good enough, Lieutenant. Over the
Go.
warrant forms.
You want to?
As far as specifics, just a probation.
Good afternoon. 2 active warrants for Mr. Kelly. One is for a federal probation violation for carjacking. The second is for unlawful taking of a motor vehicle out of the city of Santa Fe. So those were the 2 active warrants. As Chief Medina alluded to earlier, Mr. Kelly is a person of interest in a significant number of violent incidents within the city of Albuquerque that we were also looking at him for as well.
You know, a lot of times we have to remember that an investigation can only be forwarded once an individual in custody, and hopefully we can sit down and talk to this individual. And that's these violent crimes that he's a person of interest in is why detectives had been looking for this individual for a period of time to see if they could talk to the individual and get more information that would let us to possibly charge him in some of these other cases.
How many of those things were shot into the house? And you said it was a 2-hour period. So does that mean that like 2 hours elapsed before like the last thing was shot into the house, and the smoke being like the fire basically breaking out?
You know, the best information we have at this point is it's like an hour and a half. I believe an hour and a half-ish, hour and 20 minutes between the tri-chamber device being placed inside of the home and officers beginning to see fire.
Okay, so there was one tri-chamber and two of the other.
I think there was additional tri-chambers. How many total tri-chambers?
So as far as the investigation is concerned, those are all things that we still need to verify. How many actual chemical munitions are deployed, by whom, which we will do in the course of our investigation, but we don't have an actual number at this point.
Okay.
Any other questions? So I want to thank everybody. Once again, we ask the public for some patience as we process through this and we try to get additional information. We'll continue to give updates as we're able to, just due to the magnitude of the situation and to ensure that the public knows that we're being as transparent as possible. Thank you.
The update there from APD responding to a lot of questions that have popped up about the SWAT call out that happened this morning in southeast Albuquerque in the area of basically Zuni in Wyoming. You see Chief Harold Medina there, who was answering several questions from the media. As we understand, a SWAT situation happened after a suspect basically was in a vehicle and arrived at this residence. They're still not sure exactly what that connection is that the suspect had with the residence, but he got inside of this home here near, again, Zuni in Wyoming. There was a SWAT standoff. SWAT was responding to the idea that this is a barricaded subject, and then the suspect there, who is named as Keontae Kelly, I believe. I may be pronouncing that slightly wrong, but a name that starts actually with a Q, a very unique name there, who has a couple active warrants, as we understand from what APD was saying, and then as well as a person of interest in several violent incidents in Albuquerque, as the city just said there. He was inside this home, as well as there was a 14-year-old inside this home, somebody who Mr. Kelly has said, as police said, he said there was some indication initially that they may be related, but they essentially say that that is not true. This is just a young individual who hung out with Mr. Kelly. So this 14-year-old who was found dead here this morning amid this SWAT call out is said to have been somebody who hung with Mr. Kelly, if you will. So Mr. Kelly being taken into custody. The police now are trying to figure out how exactly this fire started. Of course, they're working with AFR and the fire marshal's office and arson investigators to figure out how this fire started. It sounds like there was APD sort of responding to some of the comments out there today that perhaps this fire started as a result of the SWAT team and some of the tactical gear that they use, to include, sometimes they will use munitions, including smoke devices or flashbangs, as part of the work that they do. But essentially saying here today, they are looking into seeing if indeed those were the cause, but using or showing the devices there to the media today, essentially that these are flameless devices, and there was a tri-chamber sort of gas device that was used, which is considered to be a flameless device. And so, but anyway, APD is still looking into it, seeing if those were a cause of this fire, and also how that this person that was found deceased on the scene here, again in a home near Wyoming and Zuni, how that person was killed or how that person died. But again, a lot of questions, it sounds like. APD doing this news conference here today, essentially saying that there was a lot of community sort of pushback towards what happened here today. The chief, towards the end of that news conference, talking about how protesters were there on scene, questioning what had happened and whether or not what happened needed to happen, so to speak. So getting an update here today. The suspect, again, I think it is Keontae Kelly, was or rather, he was arrested here today, and nobody has been questioned, it sounds like, at this point. The police were also making clear they did not fire any gunshots here today in this SWAT response, but there were those less than lethal sort of devices that they used. Those were used in the course of responding to the SWAT call out. About an hour and a half after that last one was used, it sounds like that is when smoke was seen in the house, and that's when they knew that the house sounded like there was a fire, an active fire with that house. So Some interesting information here today about this news conference. Our own Marilyn Upchurch is working on this story here today for KRQE News 13 at 4, which just aired here. We'll be back on the air with another update on KRQE News 13 at 5:30. And, of course, the article here, where you may be watching this live video feed, will get all those details and more here shortly. We appreciate you joining us here on KRQE.com. If you ever want to get app alerts of when we go live for things like this, news conferences like this, just go to the App Store, whether you use an Android or iPhone, and download the KRQE News 13 app, and you will get alerts if you subscribe to the live stream alert category about when we do live feeds like this. We appreciate you joining us here today, and hopefully you have a good rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.